Welcome to On Purpose with Paul. I am Paul Peters, your amazing host, entrepreneur, business owner, founder of the nonprofit, and best-selling author. I'm here today to talk to you about how to find your purpose. Welcome to On Purpose with Paul. I am Paul Peters, your amazing host, entrepreneur, owner of Covenant Case Management Services, and founder of the nonprofit Nehemiah Project and best-selling author. I'm here today to talk with a gentleman who's had a journey that led to hitting rock bottom. He's going to tell us about his journey and from rock bottom, where he is today, soaring great heights to give God the glory in everything he's doing. Michael, welcome to the show.
Paul, how are you doing?
I'm
Paul
doing
Peters.
fantastic. Yes.
You could be P2. You're P2, I'm M2.
I love that, yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about that. You said M2 and then the M2 The Rock?
M2 The Rock,
Okay.
yeah. It just kind of happened by accident, but you know, the name being Michael Molthan,
Okay.
M2,
Gotcha.
and then The Rock, you know, we'll get into it later in the story, being incarcerated as many times as I was, and at the length of time I was, which to a lot of people, it wasn't that long, but it was forever for me, you know, 4 out of 6 years. I finally realized that we hear the term rock bottom.
Yes.
And I finally realized, you know, every time I kept hitting rock bottom, you know, I'm banging my head on this same rock. I mean, it's the exact same rock at the bottom.
Gotcha.
And what I was always doing was trying to dig out of the bottom as fast as I can. And, you know, in a film that you saw and that's well known out there with I Am Second is that I was using the same tools to get out of the bottom that got me to rock bottom. So the last time after my 27th mugshot, I realized that all these times at the rock at the bottom was Christ, God. All these times it was God. So, you know, I made the decision to stay at rock bottom, which is kind of the opposite of what he says. Man, you get out of the bottom. So I stayed at the bottom, and I let men like yourself and other men at the time, inmates, you know, and to pull me out of the bottom, because left to my own devices, I would just come right back to the same place.
Sure. So let me ask a question, because I've had a similar story where I hit rock bottom, and sometimes like I'm hitting rock bottom and then it's like, well, you go back into that bottom and it seems even deeper. And there's usually a reason for that. In my situation, you know, I was the youngest of 6. You know, my mom was a victim of domestic violence. My dad attempted to kill my mom and with 6 bullets into her and went to jail. And so that had such an impact on me. And so kind of tell your story from as early as you can remember, some of the things that led to hitting rock bottom.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
I mean, and wow, what just a story. I can't wait to have you on our show just to share more of that. I mean, that's true trauma.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's trauma. You know, you know, what led me to rock bottom was, I was trying to play God. You know, I wasn't a believer. I wasn't an atheist, but I wasn't a believer. So I was agnostic. You know, the church was right and I was wrong. So that was the last place I was going to go. I mean, when I was on the run, I should have hid at the church because they would have never looked there, you know. But, you know, what got me to rock bottom was God allowed me to have all the control I wanted.
Gotcha.
He allowed me to have all the control I wanted, for everything to get completely out of control, for me to hit my knees and turn to him and to realize that I never had control in the first place. And that's when I finally realized, you know, that I was at the rock bottom. I was tired of digging too. You know, I was tired of digging. And when the pain gets bad enough, we finally realized I just can't do this anymore.
Gotcha.
And that's where it got to.
Gotcha. Tell me a little bit about your early childhood and your family life, and what was that like, and how that contributed to some of the bigger challenges, the trauma you experienced that led to imprisonment.
You know, it's really cool being here at Real News Network, and Jeff Curley's so good to see him again. And, you know, I look out these windows on the 7th floor, and I can look right behind me, you know, and there's North Dallas, Plano. And, you know, that's where I grew up. And, you know, I grew up in a well-to-do family. You know, we had everything. And my dad was successful and grew up in the country clubs. And, you know, we would go to the country club and everything looked so perfect behind closed doors. It was just chaos. I mean, it was just absolute chaos. And also a part of my story is that at a very young age, my grandfather, he violated me, and he was a raging alcoholic, and he violated me and was sexually abusing me. And it's really interesting that I'm talking about this right now, because as I'm looking over your shoulder, okay, on Harvest Lane, which is a street right here in front of us, a lot of the abuse took place right on that street.
Wow.
And as I was driving here, the highways have changed, over time. So I exited off on a different road and came the back road. I said, oh my God, I'm driving down this road that I said I would never drive down. And I drove down and it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
It didn't hurt. So he violated me for a long time, and sexual abuse all the way up until he died, probably 5th grade.
Okay.
And I kept a secret. And so I was spending my whole life growing up, trying to ease the pain and comfort of my parents and my brother by being funny and all this stuff, to try to change the way I felt.
Sure.
But at a very young age, like the age of 10 years old, I had my first sip of alcohol, and something happened, and it wasn't spiritual, as you can relate. It's euphoria is what it is. Yeah. And it slowed me down.
Gotcha.
And so in order to stay there, what would I do? I would do more. And then finally, it's Paul, I drank and I did drugs because I wanted to feel like everybody around me looked.
Sure.
That's why I did it. But then at the end of the game, I was drinking and doing drugs to feel good about the bad decisions that I was making.
Gotcha. And so when did the abuse occur? I mean, what time frames were? How old were you?
I was kindergarten. I mean, before kindergarten, all the way up through 5th grade, and he passed away of throat cancer. And I held that confusion and resentment and secret inside, my entire life, all the way up until 2017.
Wow.
Yeah, until 2017, and it was such a deep-rooted resentment. It was so deep, it was almost like I was disassociating. I did it like it never happened.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so I even questioned myself, and I'd snap out of it with nightmares and all the nightmares that I would have. There's a cool story later that we'll talk about as a result of forgiveness.
Sure.
How God's actually using my grandfather today, to help people with sexual abuse.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned forgiveness, because I had struggled with resentment and anger and bitterness toward my dad, because my dad was put in prison. I was probably 1.5, 2 years old, and my brothers had told me after he got out of jail, he came, tried to kidnap me, but I never really saw my dad. Yeah. And then he passed away when I was 13, and I was still angry because he was never there for me. I didn't have that father figure. And that's for me what led to the alcohol and the suicide attempt. And it's interesting. It's when I let that go, when I let the resentment go and I forgave him, there was a kind of a washing away. I mean, there was a lot of healing, which I'm sure in your cases,
I talk about it a lot.
Yeah,
I talk about it a lot. It's like, the key to, trauma, they say, well, Michael, you're drinking the poison hoping they die. We hear all these things, pray for them for, 2 straight weeks. Yeah. That way, and they'll just go away. I said, well, I can do that. I'm gonna pray they have pancreatic cancer and die a slow, miserable death. Yeah. But the key is, and I hope the viewers and listeners, this will help someone, is that the sooner that I accepted the role that I played in it is where I found the freedom. Wait a minute, Paul, you played a role in your dad and your mom, what they did, and Michael, you played a role in what your grandfather and your parents did. I did. And the role that I played in it is I chose to hold on to the resentment.
Correct.
And that's the role I played in it. And then once I really understood the role that I played in it and truly accepted it, because true acceptance has no resentments. True forgiveness, has no resentments. Yeah. And once I did that, I gave God permission to show me grace.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that's when God flexed his muscle and performed the supernatural.
Gotcha. It's important that I'm glad that you mentioned that, because you weren't at fault in what was done for you. But in my situation and in yours, when we don't forgive, we stay connected to the person that we're resentful for.
Well said.
And so, I think it's very important people need to understand is by letting that go, by forgiving them, does not let them off the hook.
Right.
But it lets us off the hook, because the only one we really punish is ourselves when we hold on to the resentment. We're the only one hurting. And I realized that after my dad had died, and I still was angry. I was like, he's not even alive anymore. He's not going to suffer anymore. I mean, my anger, my resentment at him was not going to cause him any more harm. He probably had forgotten all about me. And so talk about a little bit in regards to when this was going on. What kind of behavior were you exhibiting in school and family? Because you said you didn't tell anybody.
I didn't. I was very, very hyper. I was a high energy kid. Unfortunately, today we put labels on it and we try to medicate it. I'm not a doctor, but just some kids just need more attention, and that's love, you know, without rescuing or enabling. And so I was that, and I was very smart, but I didn't perform well at school. I was that kind of guy. I'm never going to use this in the future, you know. And I was right. You know, there's a lot of stuff in school I wasn't going to use for the future. But what I wish I would have done better at school was to understand structure and routine.
Gotcha.
And that's where I've had to teach myself, you know, today that structure and routine is so important in my life.
Yes.
And, you know, school provides that, that daily structure and routine. You know, I don't get to do everything I want to do every day. And so, you know, I didn't fight. I was a little bitty kid. I didn't hit puberty until my senior year of high school.
Okay.
So I was always everybody's best friend, you know? But I was also very alone, and I didn't hang out with the kids. I hung out with the men at the country club. I hung out in the men's locker room. I was a good golfer. I loved to gamble and talk.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so as you got, and we're going to take a break in just a second, but as you got older and were you drinking, so took you first to drink at 10?
I did. I started drinking at 10 and then just it carried on. I mean, I wasn't like, you know, drinking 6 beers a day after that. But it never left my mind, that feeling and that taste. And then it gradually, this is a progressive disease. So it gradually progressed. And by the 9th grade, I was drinking.
Okay. Well, hold that thought. We will be right back after these messages. Welcome back. We are here with Michael Molthan, and he is telling us his story of hitting rock bottom and where he took his journey and ultimately found Christ in that, and how he is giving God the glory and what he's doing right now. So Michael, let's pick up where you left off. You started drinking at the age of 10, and kind of tell us about what it was like during the teen years, and then of course what happened after that.
Well, my drug of choice at the time was golf. I love golf. I mean, I grew up playing golf and I did that. And then as I, you know, grew up a little more, I became a good player. Me and a couple other guys became really good, you know, players. And so in order to be better, we had to play with better golfers. So I was playing with men, you know, businessmen and very successful businessmen. And, you know, I didn't realize I was starting my networking career at a very young age. And then, you know, my dad was a workaholic, was never involved in our life. And so these men were my mentors. They taught me how to drink. They taught me how to gamble, play golf, what it was like to be a man. And they also were teaching me how to die. So, but I liked these men because I wanted that rock star lifestyle, that fast pace. I mean, because I was fast paced, you know, I want to go fast. And so, you know, it's a gradual, I mean, there was no encounters with the law, but, you know, it was really golf was number one. And then the drinking was a byproduct. And then eventually as this disease got worse, it became this, you know, drugs and alcohol became my source because the pain was just getting worse and worse with the secrets. So that was my teen years growing up. I was a partier. You know, I wasn't going to treatment or anything like that yet. But there was a time when, you know, a couple of times when I was very young, I tried to take my own life, swallowed a whole bottle of Valium of my mom's. And then I also, which she was prescribed, but I wasn't. So I swallowed the whole bottle, and I don't know how I survived that, weighing 60 pounds. And then there was a time where, you know, I literally took my car as fast as I could and ran into a telephone pole, ironically, right behind the world headquarters of I Am Second, where I Am Second is today. And it was, you know, it was neat. We're going back there and celebrating I Am Second Day. And we talked about that when they interviewed me on that. It just hit me that day and right in the moment. But there's been multiple suicide attempts. There's been some overdoses, you know. But I went from high school to the pro golf tour. I was on the PGA Tour and I caddied for the best golfer in the world at the time, Lanny Watkins. And so I did that for, you know, over 5 years. But I grew up in real estate, and I grew up in construction, and was surrounded by those people, and I'm very artistic. And so when I got off the PGA Tour after the '95 Ryder Cup, I ended up getting off and married my best friend from kindergarten, and we started a luxury home building company and did that. And after 20 years, became one of the most well-known high-end luxury home builders in the country, especially here at the local level, where we build very complicated, big projects. And I just loved it.
Yeah. Now, is that something you got from your father? Where was the interest in
No,
that?
my father was furniture. He was in the furniture
gotcha.
business, but our family friends, the Goodman families of Goodman Homes, where I actually cut my teeth. And then I got into it because my ex-father-in-law was a civil engineer, architectural engineer, and he was the vice president, CFO of a large commercial construction company here. So he retired, and then we got into the home building business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But I have two brothers myself, both of them are contractors. So it's very interesting. It kind of runs in the family. I never picked that up, even though I did it for a year. I took some time off from college. So kind of walk us through, how long were you a luxury home builder?
Over 20 years.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, over 20 years and here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Not really Fort Worth, but Dallas area, the Park Cities. We were just talking earlier offline, North Dallas, Plano.
Gotcha.
But we went down to Park Cities, University Park, Highland Park, and built some really cool stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have a mentoring center, work with at-risk kids in a very high crime, low poverty area. And a lot of times people would think, well, that's where you're getting a lot of the problems. And the misconception is, in your nice homes, in your nice families, there's hidden secrets.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because that's our mission at M2 The Rock, is raising the meaning of rock bottom. In fact, when I was incarcerated, here I am. I had, I had all the successes, the material things as the world defines it, or the culture defines it, but I was empty inside. And I used to hear people say that, I'm like, empty inside? I'm not empty inside. I got everything. It was me. But I remember being locked up going, it's really easy for the people who are rock bottom and on the street corner. It's easy to help them. It really is. But what about the person that's really struggling, who has everything? How can I help that person so their story doesn't become mine?
Correct.
Because I used to hear those stories. Man, he was worth $25 million and now he's homeless. And I would hear that. I'm like going, what? How does that happen? Well, I wasn't worth 25 million, but you're looking at them. It happened to me. And it's just it's basically suicide.
It's interesting because, given your upbringing, all of that happened, that trauma, which had not been dealt with, because you didn't tell anybody, you didn't get the proper treatment, you were around all these people that were quote unquote successful, which you wanted, and you were living that lifestyle, but inside you were dying.
I was dying, and plus I had, and I don't blame her for this. She was just doing the best she could with the tools she had. But I had a mom that was just taking me every doctor in the world and say, fix them, put them on medication, and all the medication was doing was messing me up. It was making me hyper. It was making me tired. I was like this, And then they say you're bipolar, and I'm like, well, of course I am. You're giving me stuff to go up. You're giving me stuff to go down. I'm going to be all over the place. And so the best detox I've ever had was being incarcerated. They didn't give you nothing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because it's interesting. Being one who struggled with alcohol when I was younger, it was something I used to numb the pain of what I was experiencing. And often, in our parents' ignorance, they fix them, like you said, and put medication, which all that does is mask the symptoms of something inside. And so talk about, as your luxury builder, you're living the lifestyle, and the foundation begins to crumble. Talk about that, what led to the incarceration.
Well, more trauma. It was more trauma that, I could handle self-inflicted trauma. I really could. I could go, okay, this is my fault, my bad. I created this. But, there was, in 2009, January 6, 2009, it was just a normal day. And my wife of 14 years at the time collapsed with a massive brain hemorrhage.
Oh, wow.
And my life changed from that day forward. And, didn't have the best relationship with my parents, of course, and then my in-laws, and a lot of money involved. And when she went down, we were planning a funeral. She had what's called an AVM, and the survival rate from that is nothing. I mean, and so my life changed that day all the way up until this day. And so I wasn't prepared for that. And, you know, and the way I handled it wasn't good, but I had people fighting over money. I had families going at each other. Everybody was doing this, and then people saying stuff about me that weren't true. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. And I just lost it. I literally lost it. I was very close to my two boys, who I still haven't spoken to this day.
Oh, wow.
You know, that I've had to work through, and that's very traumatizing. And so watching them being brainwashed and going through all this stuff, I mean, I was completely powerless, but I wanted to fight, and I was handling it all the wrong ways. I didn't have any tools on how to handle that. And that was a big pivotal point in my life. And then, you know, I got pulled over. You know, I was intoxicated one night and just right around this building, and got pulled over, and, you know, had a large amount of cocaine. I love saying that. Us drug addicts, we don't say, I just had a little bit of cocaine. I had a large amount of cocaine in my truck, and I was intoxicated, but it was really scary because I'd never been pulled over with a substance in my car. I've had substance in my car, but I got pulled over this time, and I did have a lot, and it was a first-degree felony. And I went to jail, and I arrived at a place I said that I would never go. And here's what's scary, Paul, is that, and I've said this before many times, is literally I go, okay, this is scary. I'm never, ever doing this again. And I'm in it. I'm in it with every ounce of blood in my body. I'm never drinking again. I'm never doing dope again. I have lost my mind. Plus, I was making it believable what my ex-in-laws were saying about me. Now my actions were going, well, maybe they are right, you know? And so when I got bonded, I didn't know how to bond out. And I heard felony. I didn't think I could get bonded. I thought I was going to prison for like 50 years. I mean, I was so uneducated about this. Today, I could be a criminal lawyer. But when I got bonded out, I got back to my hotel and I said, you know, I just need to knock the edge off. I'm getting anxious. I just need to knock the edge off. And I just took one sip of alcohol like this, and I put it down, and I got that, See, I never remember the, I always remember the, And I was drunk and high again that night. 26 mugshots later is when I finally surrendered.
What was the time frame from when it first happened? 2009?
Out of 6 years, I was incarcerated 4 years.
Okay. So when you made that promise to yourself that you weren't going to do it again, when was the next time you got arrested?
Oh, wow. We're writing the book right now, and we're going through this timelines. The person writing it's one of these timelines. It drives me crazy. I think it was 3 weeks later. 3 weeks later.
And then when you were first arrested with the felony, and how long were you in jail for?
48 hours.
Okay.
I had my people. I had my people come get me. You know,
plus you had some money, so you probably were able to.
And so actually, at the time, I was running really low at the time on money, and that's where my behaviors got worse because God was taking everything away from me. You know, everything away from me. I'm a fighter. I just kept fighting them until after the 27th mugshot, God was all I needed because He was all I had. You know, and that's where I was at.
What's interesting, I want to share a little bit before the break, but and I was a chaplain, so I want to talk about that 27 times, but we will be right back after this break. Welcome back to On Purpose with Paul. We were here with Michael Molthan, and he was telling us his story. He went from the highest point of being a successful luxury home builder to now he's been imprisoned. One time in 2009 that led to 27 more.
27 total.
Talk about that, because 2009, and then when was the last time you were in jail?
So May 29th, 2017 was my 27th mugshot.
Gotcha.
And like I said, I knew Judge Jennifer Bennett, who I call my professional photographer. You know, she takes all my mugshots, but who's now a very, very close friend of mine. by default, but no, I love her. We do a lot of great stuff together, helping people. But May 29, 2017 was my 27th mugshot, and I knew it was over. I was about to go to prison for a long time. And what was interesting is that in Dallas, Texas, it's Lou Sterrett Justice Center, and I didn't realize this until the more I toured the facility. But they have a North Tower and a South Tower, and the North Tower is for aggravated, more high-level crimes, and the South Tower is your misdemeanors, your DUIs and stuff like that. Not discounting, it's a crime. But this time they put me in the North Tower, the second floor. And I'm like, why am I in this area? The North Tower second floor is one of the most dangerous floors in the country, prisons, because they call it the jungle. And that's where they put all your murderers and your aggravated assault charges, armed robbers. I mean, these people are going to do some time. Yeah. And when they put me in 2D, inside I was scared to death. Now, when they put me in there, I'm the only white guy and I'm proper. So they're checking me, they're sizing me up. They're like going, this guy's white and proper. So they think, they think I'm living an alternative lifestyle, or they think I'm a cop, so I had to, I got jumped and got this tooth knocked out. And that was on a previous arrest, same as just mind my own business. I didn't say a word. In fact, outside the studio, I'm actually a very quiet person. So I'm in there just mind my own business, and I'm on the top bunk, and my cellmate catches chain, which means he's being shipped off to the next unit. And I'm waiting for, I've been indicted and I'm waiting on, being sentenced. And the bottom bunk opens up and I'm about to get down. But before I get down, I get called out for a visitor to meet with, I'd never had a visitor ever. And except one time my Uncle Mike came and saw me briefly, but I went out there and it was my mom just to wish me farewell. And I was like, but it wasn't this nice farewell. It was like, here we go again. And I simply just called for the guard and I said, I'm out of here. And as I was walking back, an inmate was being removed from the tank, and he just handed me this book. And I'm just holding it, I don't even look at it. And I get in there and there's this old man in my cell, and we're in a 2-man cell. It's 4 by 9. So if you have a house, go to your secondary bathroom, it's a 4 by 9. That was the size of my cell, that the doors were locked. And this old man, and I got on the top bunk, and he has polio and he's doing life for murder. He was back on a bench warrant. And he says, hey, he goes, what's your name? And I said, my name's, they call me Rabbit. And they call me Rabbit because I was so hyper. I couldn't sit still. I was always pacing. And he says, I go, what's your name? He goes, my name's Ooh-wee. I said, Ooh-wee. And I go, yeah. And he says, and I'll make a long story short. He says, what's that book you got there? And I said, well, I picked it up. I said, well, it says Detours by Dr. Tony Evans. And he says, oh man, I love Dr. Tony Evans. And so he goes, will you read it to me? And I'm like, read it to you? Well, you can read it. I'm not going to read it. He says, no, I need you to read it to me. He says, I can't read or write. I'm like, and that blew me away. I mean, I never, ever heard of, I've never been around anybody that couldn't read or write. So I said, okay, I'll read it to you. It kind of felt weird at first, but then I was reading it to him. It was a story of Joseph. And I'm like, oh man, this is my story, and I'm reading it. As people have said, Michael, you've had the story of Job and Joseph. There's a lot of similarities, okay? But the one thing that it's not similar is they believed in God. See, I didn't. And as I'm reading this, these black words on white paper are really starting to touch me. And it's helping ooh-wee. And then so other inmates start coming in, and I'm reading it to them. And then I start, drawing lines under words, and I start speaking. I'm not preaching. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm saying, hey, check this out. I said, I can really relate to this quote, And I started writing quotes in prison, and I would read that to them. And they loved my handwriting. I had really unique handwriting. So I just kept just serving these guys. And I realized that 4 days go by and I wasn't pacing anymore. And, I was apprehended on May 29, 2017. On July 7th, 2017, I literally was in the top bunk, and I, sat up in the bunk, and I couldn't breathe. And I just took this deep breath in, And as I breathed out, I felt like all this anger, like the Green Mile, the movie Green Mile fly, all the flies coming out of their body. And I'm not a movie watcher until now. But I just remember I saw that one part of that movie and it just reminded me of it, all this anger and resentment and all this stuff's coming out of my body. I take this deep breath back in. It was like ice water. And I've heard people say that before, but it was literally like I was full of love. But it was like the love. I was like looking around and see guards and I go, man, I love that guard. I love that person. Oh my God, I love that person. I love this guy. I love this person. I mean, it's just this love. But that's what I feel on the inside. But I was trying to figure out what was happening. And I had this awakening and Christ came into my life. And my life hasn't been the same since.
It's interesting because I too love the story of Joseph. And I too love the story of Job. And so what was it about the story of Joseph that spoke to you?
I think the betrayal, being, we call it being kicked to the curb. I'm saying this in a healthy way that I'm not being a victim. I played a role in a lot of stuff. I wasn't Lily White, I wasn't this angel. But I had things that happened to me that just weren't okay. We all have, I'm not unique. But I was just so confused. And I think a lot of it was his confusion. But where his story really touched me and helped me is that he had this faith in a God, where I'm like going, what are they talking about? I've had those foxhole prayers where I say, come into my life, all this stuff. But it was, it's interesting it's happening because this is it's a big part of my life right now, but it was that true surrender. It was that true surrender and these church words I felt, the Holy Spirit and the Spirit and all these things happening. I was feeling this stuff. Like, what is happening to me? But Joseph, it was just, I think a lot of it was, he wasn't confused because he had faith. I was confused because I was gaining faith and it was so new to me.
Sure. It's interesting for the story of Joseph and Job, because Job, rarely does the Bible define or describe someone as righteous, and Job was righteous. And at no time,
yes, he was.
At no time, for those that don't know the story of Job, there were a lot of bad things happened to him. Lost his children, home, all of his wealth, and it was kind of a setup by God.
He did. It was a total setup.
And if anyone was to play the victim, it would be Job. And in all of that happened to him at no time, and there's a famous line there that says, though he slay me, I will not turn against him. It's a paraphrase of it. But and same thing with Joseph. Joseph was falsely accused, imprisoned. He didn't do anything wrong. He was betrayed by his brothers. But yet, and I tell people, Joseph was given a dream at 17. And 17 years later, 34, that dream manifested. And I remember the line that he, in the Bible, talks about, you meant it for evil, and he was talking to his brothers, but God meant it for good. And so talk about that, because something happened to you in prison.
It did.
Yeah, talk about that, because that's a fascinating story.
I like that you said that, what you brought up, that Joseph was betrayed. I was too. But I also betrayed people too, as a result, and I do it my own way. And that's something I've had to work through, is the people that I've hurt, as a result of that. But yes, something happened, and it was interesting because, the book Detours by Tony Evans led me to the Bible, and I was reading the Bible. Man, I'm just soaking it up, and I wasn't wanting to get out of prison or anything like that, because I really train, when you're doing time, you're doing easy time, you train especially with God, you learn how to live in the now. I mean, you're right here, right now. And so I wasn't in prison. I was in seminary school. That's what I would tell myself. I'm in seminary school. I'm not in prison. I'm in seminary, so I would just study and study and study. And the state of Texas was paying for it. That's the way I looked at it. But I started really doing a study on forgiveness, and I really recognized I wasn't feeling, as I had this awakening, I wasn't feeling resentful or angry. And I had caught chain, and I got down to Central Texas. And once I get down to Central Texas, I'm right back in a rock and roll tank again. And this guy comes up to me and says, "Hey man, what are you reading?" And I said, well, here, you can read. I had a bunch of journals. I said, you can read if you want to. And he says, well, I can't read or write. And I'm like, okay, I see you. Here we go again. And so I started doing it again. But I read something, I didn't know how to pray. So I go to the back of this Bible. I said, how to pray. And I said, how to pray. And it sent me to Matthew 6. Yeah. And so Matthew 6 talks about the Lord's Prayer. And so I'm reading the Lord's Prayer and really reading it slow and studying it. And then I get to Matthew 6, 14, 15. This is my translation. It says, when you forgive the ones who have sinned against you, God will forgive you. Yes. Okay? Here's my translations. When we forgive the ones who have hurt me, okay, God gonna bless your game. He's gonna bless your game. And I kid you not, let's wait till the next one. Let's wait. I got to share that with you.
I'm so looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It's funny because as a chaplain, I was involved with working with a lot of inmates, male and female, because the county jail, they're kind of mixed, they're separated. And I would work with addiction groups, and I would see them coming back again and again. But we will catch up with that in a second. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. We are here with Michael Molthan, and he is going to share with us how God used abuse and betrayal and addiction to serve a purpose, a higher purpose that you probably didn't even know. And he did it through putting you in a place where you didn't have control.
That's right.
And so he could begin to work in your life. So talk about that.
Yeah, he used uneducated, unqualified murderers to change my life, and I forget about that today. I get right back into self, and I get back into the gas of the world, and I want what I want. And I'm so grateful for this interview today, because it's taking me right back to where I need to be. Yeah. I need to continue to think small. But it was, after I read Matthew 6, 14 and 15, I kid you not, it was another awakening about forgiveness. And I felt so free. And as I look back, today when I speak and I work with people, my whole mission is to help people see life through God's perspective, not the world or the cultures. Okay. Sometimes not the churches, but through God's perspective. And when I look back at, my story, I see why he allowed all the things that he allowed to happen, so I could use it today to help others. Okay. Everyone's an addict. Okay. What is addiction? Addiction is a person, place, thing, or a thought that has become my source. It's the street name for spiritual stronghold. Yeah. But once I forgave, I kid you not, 4 days later, okay, I'm in 300 miles away in Central Texas. They come over the loudspeaker. And they literally say, Michael Molthan, bunk and junk, which means you're free. I'm like, and the whole tank's like freaking out. They're like going, this is impossible. And the guards are even saying it. They're like, what's going on? They said, State of Texas says he's free. They literally physically had to kick me out of prison. And I didn't know what to do. And I've said this before, people like this. That's the first time I said I hadn't seen the sun or anything. And it was hot. Yeah. It was in October, and it was hot down in Central Texas. And I literally said, God, what do you want me to do? He said, walk. And that's what I said in the I'm second film. I'm like going, I thought that was witchcraft when you hear it. But what it is, when God speaks to us, the Spirit speaks to us through thoughts and feelings. Yeah. It's so prevalent, And so I walked, and I made the journey 300 miles back right here to Dallas to turn myself in. And Judge Bennett blessed my game. Yeah. And she said, go pay it forward. And here I am sitting with you 7 years later.
Yeah. Explain that, because you got off on technicalities. And so why did you feel like you had to go back to the judge and turn yourself in when they basically said you're free to go?
Well, I hadn't served my full term.
Gotcha.
We could sit there and discount this was God.
Yeah.
This is real life miracle. And I can't, God sets our bond. Yeah. Okay. And he gives Christ the key, and then Christ puts it in the lock and sets us free. Yeah. That's literally what happened to me. Yeah. What an incredible miracle that happened. But man, just being like Paul in the Bible in flesh, and it's like I still betray him to this day. Yeah. And I forget about that until I do stuff like this with you. Sure. And And I don't ever want to forget that,
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, God, why is this not going the way I want it to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we not, moving the direction we want to move for you?
Yeah.
Well, you ain't ready, homeboy.
Yeah.
I still got to do some more polishing on you.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because I think it's very important, the connection with what leads somebody to slavery and addiction, and how playing the victim, living in the past, how that keeps somebody connected to that addictive mentality. In your case, led to imprisonment. Some cases it may not resort to that, but what hope can you give to those that are currently struggling with addiction, how they get out of that, and how you discovered it? And I think for me, as well as for you, the power of forgiveness, because we often get caught in these addictive tendencies because we're hurting.
Yeah.
And we want to numb
You nailed it.
So talk about that, because I think there's people looking for hope.
Remember again, addiction the word addiction is nowhere in the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. Addiction is the street name again for spiritual stronghold. That's comforting, because that means every human being on the planet is an addict.
Yeah.
Okay. We are seeking visible things to try to fix our invisible problems. The key is recognizing that. See, I never recognized that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so once I understood today, I know the direction. I go, wait a minute. Why am I going to go buy something when I don't need it? What's the real problem, here? So my challenge is for everyone is we need to stop focusing on addiction, but why the addiction?
Correct.
And we need to stop watering leaves on the tree, wondering why the tree's dying. We got to get to the root of the problem. All right. And it's all trauma based.
Yeah.
It's all trauma based. And trauma it's a word that's being used so much now. And it's almost like a crutch word, I'm suffering from, but there's a very wide spectrum of it.
Sure.
Listen, when I was 6 years old, I didn't want to be a drug addict, alcoholic.
Yeah.
Never wanted to be that. Still don't want to be that.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing about to provide hope for someone is, this is what helped me. There are so many people that are saying, you just got to ask for help, reach out for help. That counts. Okay. But the true honesty within is to simply take that risk. And I look at you, Paul, and I go, Paul, I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Will you please help me?
Sure.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's about that connection, with the man, the industry that you're in. Paul, I don't know how to do finances, and you're a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Will you help me?
Yeah.
Saying I don't know opens that door up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How can you not help me?
Sure.
And that's what we need to do. Everyone. I don't know why I get angry. I don't know why I shop. I don't know why I overeat. I don't know why I gamble. I don't know why I work so much. I don't know why, I say I'm going to be home at 6 with my family, but I can just cram one more project in. Why do I say I'm going to be home at 6 and I come home at 8? Okay. What's the real problem?
Yeah.
I don't want to go home.
Yeah.
Why don't you want to go home?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, let's look at the role that you play in it, Michael.
Yeah. In the 5 minutes we have left.
That makes sense?
It does. It makes complete sense. And I do remember listening to one of your podcasts when you talked about how fear it connects you, keeps you to that bondage. And so I want you to address that, and I want you to kind of talk about what you're doing now. Because you went from luxury building homes, and what are you doing now?
Well, everything that we do, and I say we, I always use I statements, but I'm going to say we. I'm going to step out there. Everything that we do is fear-based.
Yeah.
Fear is an opportunity for me to turn to God or to go to prison.
Yeah.
That's my story. But what I mean, if we don't turn to God of our understanding, when we get into fear and we turn the other way, that's when I start trying to play God. And I'll drink and do drugs, shop, gamble, whatever that visible thing is, I'll start reaching for it.
Yeah.
When I start reaching for this visible thing, I'm so grateful today. I'm like, I see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, I'm in fear. I just need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you just give me a good listening to it. I usually talk myself in a circle,
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we have to, to address. The solution to fear is talk.
Sure.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prayer is everything. We can pray, but God's going to say, okay, talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, that is a solution. But as far as, you know, life today, you know, I never planned on our show, M to the Rock. You know, we literally started right across the street at iHeartRadio. They contacted us and then came over here for a year with Jeff Curley here at Real News Network and his incredible team. And now we're doing it out of our studio at home and traveling the country speaking. And we have a nonprofit that we're aggressively pushing right now, which we raise money to provide services for people with any need. With any need. It could be drugs and alcohol. It could be treatment. It could be intensive outpatient, coaching, you know, any of those things, medications. You know, there are situations where medications are needed as long as it doesn't become the source. If God is here and medications are here, okay, what's eventually going to happen is the medications are going to go away. But if it's the other way, I'm just an active addiction. So all these things that we offer these services for is really pushing us. We're I'm in the middle of 2 books right now. A book of my memoir and then a daily devotional. And then that's all I can think of right now.
That's an awesome story. I think a lot of times you're asking yourself when you get through the abuse and the situation that creates the trauma. And a lot of times, if they are believers, they may blame God and distance themselves. In your situation, you didn't really have that.
Great topic.
Looking back on all that happened, help us understand, at least from my perspective in my life when I did that, how God was working and where you're at now. Because through the power of forgiveness, you're helping so many people.
Well, it's really cool. And I'll end with this great story is that I was driving to a place to speak and didn't know what I was going to talk about. And I went straight into the men's bathroom and there was a wall urinal here and a wall urinal here. And the guy was in this wall urinal. So as my whole life, even to this day, I could be at home by myself and I locked the bathroom door behind me. I waited for this guy to come out so I could use the restroom. And I came out and I said, you know what? I still got this. I'm going to talk about this. And so I literally told this story in front of this big group of people. And when I actually drew it on a big whiteboard, the bathroom, and shared this story. There was a man in the front row just crying like crazy. And he hugged me afterwards. He goes, man, you saved my life, because I didn't think anybody thought or felt that way. I didn't either until I just shared it. And then he came up to me. Little did I know that his family member was this big wig at Securus Technology. Government communication to all the White House, FBI, every courthouse, every jail, every prison. And a week later, I'm getting thousands of emails from inmates all over the country. And as a result of me forgiving my grandfather and sharing this story not as a victim, but as a gift, the show is on every tablet, in every prison, and every jail in the country as a result of God using my grandfather to help people.
Amazing story.
We don't know who we're dealing with.
Michael, it's been a truly honor. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.